who was unfortunately unable to be here today, I am very pleased to present this event, the conversation between Dr. Irene Vallejo, Spanish historian, writer, and philologist, and one of the greatest Spanish literary stars of recent times, and Charlotte Whittle, editor, writer, and literary translator. Before I introduce them properly, a bit of housekeeping. The fire exit is behind you. Please, everybody look at that over there. And there are toilets on this floor, out of the door and on the left, and also on the ground floor. Papyrus was first published in Spanish as El Infinito en un junco, the copy is there, over there, in 2019, and has since been published in 30 countries and translated into 27 languages and counting. Yes. In Spain, it has won multiple awards, including the Spanish National Essay Prize in 2020 and the Premio Aragon, the highest distinction awarded by a government in Aragon in 2021. Aragon is the region where Irene comes from. Irene also received the Antonio Sancha Prize awarded by the Publishers Association of Madrid in 2022, with the panel highlighting the extraordinary contribution to the understanding of the history of books and the promotion of reading. Her work has also been recognized internationally. For example, through the Pedro Enriquez Urueña International Essay Prize, awarded by the Mexican Academy of Language in 2022, and the Weijing Book Award awarded by the National Library of China this year, 2023. In addition to Papyrus, Irene is the author of 2 children's books, 2 novels, and 3 collections of essays and short fiction. Her writing often mixes discussion of ancient writers with current events. Papyrus is a story of the book's journey from oral tradition to scroll to codices, and how that transition led to the very foundation of the Western culture. In the book, Irene describes how the earliest books made from reeds from the Nile were worth fighting over and dying for, and follows the journey of the earliest books from the creation of the Library of Alexandria to the fall of the Roman Empire. She talks about the spies, scribes, illuminators, librarians, booksellers, authors, and statesmen who had a complicated relationship with books and the written word that bears similarity with today. They include Aristophanes and the censorship of humorists, Sappho and the empowerment of women's voices, and Seneca and the problem of a post-truth world. Today, we will hear Irene in conversation with editor, writer, and literary translator Charlotte Whittle. Where would we be without translators? Where? Translations play an essential part in the way knowledge and information travel around the world, helping overcome communication barriers and bringing people from different cultures together and allowing them to exchange ideas. In addition to Irene Vallejo's Papyrus, Charlotte has translated the Mexican writer Jorge Comensal, the Mutations, published in 2019, as well as the Argentine writer Norah Lange, People in the Room, here in our library. Congratulations, Charlotte. And A Note from Childhood, published in 2018 and 2021, respectively. Well, copies of Papyrus published in the UK by Hodder and Stoughton will be available for purchase after the event. And now you will be, and Irene will be able to sign them. Now I would like to welcome and give the floor to our speakers, Irene and Charlotte. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for that generous introduction. It's music to my ears when anyone talks about the importance of translation. It's an honor to be at the Cervantes Institute. Thank you so very much for your invitation. And it's a great pleasure and honor to be here with Irene Vallejo, who, as an author, it has been an absolute dream to work with on this translation. We are going to start with a reading, a bilingual reading. We'll read first in English and then in Spanish. Okay. Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yes. You, the reader of this book, lived for a few years in an oral world. From your earliest babbling as a baby until you learned to read, words only existed for you as the sound of a voice. All around, you saw the mute drawings of letters, but they meant nothing to you. The grown-ups who ran the world were the ones who read and wrote. You didn't know what they were doing, but it mattered little. It was enough that you could speak. The first stories you ever heard came in through the shells of your ears. Your eyes didn't yet know how to listen. Then came school with its downstrokes, loops, letters, syllables. The same transition from oral to written culture that humanity underwent took place on a smaller scale inside you. Every night, sitting on the edge of my bed, my mother read books to me. She was the rhapsodist, and I her captivated audience. The place, time, gestures, and silences were always the same. It was our own private ritual. As her eyes sought the place she had left off reading, she went back a few sentences to pick up the thread of the story, and all the day's troubles and all the fears that might come in the night were carried away on the tale's soft breeze. The time we spent reading seemed to me a small, impermanent paradise. I have since learned that every paradise is like that, modest and fleeting. Her voice. I listened to her voice as she helped me imagine the sounds of the story she told. The splash of water against the hull of a boat, the soft crunch of snow underfoot, the clash of two swords, an arrow whistling through the air, mysterious steps, wolves howling, whispers behind a door. We felt so close, my mother and I, together in two places at once, closer than ever, but split between parallel dimensions, outside and in, a clock ticking in the bedroom for half an hour, while years went by in the story, at once alone and surrounded by many people as we befriended and spied on the characters. One by one, I lost my milk teeth during those years. My favorite thing to do while she told me stories was to wiggle a dangling tooth with my finger, feel it detach from its root, come looser and looser, and, when it finally fell out with a few salty strands of blood, gaze at it in the palm of my hand. My childhood was breaking apart, leaving gaps in my body and little white shards behind me. The time for listening to stories would soon be over, though I didn't yet know it. And when we came to an especially thrilling episode, a chase, a nearby assassin, an imminent discovery, a sign of betrayal, my mother would cough and feign a sore throat. This was the agreed upon signal for the first interruption. I can't go on reading. Then I had to beg in despair. No, don't stop here. Keep going just a bit longer. I'm tired. Please, please. We would act out this little scene and then she would continue. Of course, I knew she was tricking me, but I was always afraid. In the end, one of the interruptions would be for real, and she would close the book, give me a kiss, leave me alone in the dark, and give herself over to that secret life lived by grown-ups at night, those thrilling, mysterious, longed-for nights, that foreign, forbidden land. The closed book remained on the nightstand, stubborn and quiet, leaving me exiled from the camps of the Yukon or the shores of the Mississippi, or the Chateau d'If, or the Admiral Benbow Inn, or the Mountain of Souls, the jungle of Misiones, Lake Maracaibo, Benya Creek's neighborhood in Odessa, Ventimiglia, Nevsky Prospect, the island of Barataria, Shilov's lair in the borderlands of Mordor, the moorland by Baskerville Hall, Nizhny Novgorod, the castle of no return, Sherwood Forest, Frankenstein's laboratory, Baron Cosimo's trees in Umbrosa, the Little Prince's planet, the Chateau of Yvonne de Galais, Fagin's den, the island of Ithaca. And though I might open up the book in the right place, saved by the bookmark, it was no use, since I would see only lines full of spiders' legs that refused to reveal to me even a paltry word. Without my mother's voice, I could not conjure the magic. To read was to cast a spell, to coax speech from the pages of books that in those days seemed to me like enormous paper ant hills.
And now the original version in Spanish. Tú, que lees este libro, has vivido durante años en un mundo oral. Desde tus balbuceos con lengua de trapo hasta que aprendiste a leer, las palabras solo existían en la voz. Encontrabas por todas partes los dibujos mudos de las letras, pero no significaban nada para ti. Los adultos que controlaban el mundo, ellos sí, leían y escribían. Tú no entendías bien qué era eso, ni te importaba demasiado, porque te bastaba hablar. Los primeros relatos de tu vida entraron por las caracolas de tus orejas. Tus ojos aún no sabían escuchar. Luego llegó el colegio, los palotes, los redondeles, las letras, las sílabas. En ti se ha cumplido, a pequeña escala, el mismo tránsito que hizo la humanidad desde la oralidad a la escritura. Mi madre me leía libros todas las noches, sentada en la orilla de mi cama. Ella era la rapsoda, yo su público fascinado. El lugar, la hora, los gestos y los silencios eran siempre los mismos, nuestra íntima liturgia. Mientras sus ojos buscaban el lugar donde había abandonado la lectura y luego retrocedían unas frases atrás para recuperar el hilo de la historia. La suave brisa del relato se llevaba todas las preocupaciones del día y los miedos intuidos de la noche. Aquel tiempo de lectura me parecía un paraíso pequeño y provisional. Después he aprendido que todos los paraísos son así, humildes y transitorios. Su voz. Yo escuchaba su voz y los sonidos del cuento que ella me ayudaba a oír con la imaginación, el chapoteo del agua contra el casco de un barco, el silbido de una flecha, el crujido suave de la nieve, el choque de dos espadas, pasos misteriosos, aullidos de lobo, cuchicheos detrás de una puerta. Nos sentíamos muy unidas, mi madre y yo, juntas en dos lugares a la vez, más juntas que nunca, pero escindidas en dos dimensiones paralelas, dentro y fuera, con un reloj que hacía tic-tac en el dormitorio durante media hora y años enteros transcurriendo en la historia, solas y al mismo tiempo rodeadas de mucha gente, amigas y espías de los personajes. En esos años fui perdiendo los dientes de leche, uno a uno. Mi gesto favorito mientras ella me contaba cuentos era menear un diente tembloroso con el dedo, sentirlo desprenderse de sus raíces, bailar cada vez más suelto y cuando finalmente se partía, soltando unos hilos salados de sangre, colocármelo en la palma de la mano para mirarlo. La infancia se estaba rompiendo, dejaba huecos en mi cuerpo y añicos blancos en el camino, y el tiempo de escuchar cuentos acabaría pronto, aunque yo no lo sabía. Y cuando llegábamos a episodios especialmente emocionantes, una persecución, la proximidad del asesino, la inminencia de un descubrimiento, la señal de una traición, mi madre carraspeaba, fingía un picor de garganta, tosía. Era la señal pactada de la primera interrupción. Ya no puedo leer más. Entonces me tocaba suplicar y desesperarme. No, no lo dejes aquí. Sigue un poquito más. Estoy cansada. Por favor, por favor. Interpretábamos la pequeña comedia y luego ella seguía adelante. Yo sabía que me engañaba, claro, pero siempre me asustaba. Al final, una de las interrupciones sería de verdad. Y ella cerraría el libro, me daría un beso, me dejaría a solas en la oscuridad y se entregaría a esa vida secreta que viven los mayores por la noche, sus noches apasionantes, misteriosas, deseadas, ese país extranjero y prohibido a los niños. El libro cerrado se quedaría sobre la mesilla, callado y terco, expulsándome de los campamentos del Yukón o de las orillas del Mississippi o de la fortaleza de If o de la posada del almirante Benbow, del Monte de las Ánimas, de la selva de Misiones, del lago de Maracaibo, del barrio de Benia Kirk en Odessa, de Ventimiglia, de la perspectiva Nevsky, de la ínsula Barataria, del antro de Ella la Araña en la frontera de Mordor, del páramo junto a la mansión de los Baskerville, de Nizhny Novgorod, del castillo de Irás y no volverás, del bosque de Sherwood, del siniestro laboratorio de anatomía de Ingolstadt, de la arboleda del barón Cosimo de Hombrosa, del planeta de los baobabs, de la misteriosa casa de Yvonne de Galais, de la guarida de Feijin, de la isla de Ítaca. Y aunque yo abriese el libro en el lugar oportuno, señalado por el marcapáginas, no serviría de nada, pues solo vería líneas llenas de patas de araña que se negarían a decirme una mísera palabra. Sin la voz de mi madre, la magia no se hacía realidad. Leer era un hechizo, sí, conseguir que hablasen esos extraños insectos negros de los libros, que entonces me parecían enormes hormigueros de papel.
Thank you.
Papyrus is a vast and sweeping history that covers great swathes of time in the ancient world, but it's also a story about a little girl called Irene who loved to listen to stories and who became obsessed with books as she learned to read. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about why it was important for you that this also be a personal story as well as a sweeping historical account.
Well, I wanted to share with my public, with my readers, with my audience, the reasons why I am so passionate about books and reading. And it comes back to my childhood, to the happy time of bedtime stories, when my father and my mother used to tell me those wonderful fables and poems and novels. And I learned to love this intimacy, this invitation to fantasy. For me, it was like happiest moment in the day when she sits down, my mother, mainly my mother, she sits by my side, and she was a wonderful, amazing storyteller. So she knew how to do it, and the intonations of the voice and the gestures, and it was like a performance for me every day, and I love it. And my mother always wanted to become a librarian. it was her dream, like might here, but she couldn't. And one of the reasons why I wrote this book was to persuade her that somehow she became a librarian, because she helped me to love books. She made the writer and the author out of this girl, and she was an amazing, passionate companion in the adventure of discovering books and reading. And that's why I'm so interested in oral culture, because I fall in love with fables and tales and stories, not with books. Books, as I wrote in Papyrus, well, something mysterious to me at the very beginning, because I didn't know how to read or write. So these were for me like ant hives, and only the grown-ups knew how to decipher it. So what I saw was rows of black tiny insects, and not stories or fantasies or tales. So yeah, for me, at the beginning was the oral transmission and the passion for these kind of stories. And I wanted to pay tribute to all the parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles or whoever reads aloud for children, because it's a beautiful introduction into lovely books. And yeah, it was important for me, essential to pay attention to all those gestures, personal gestures in our daily life, with which we create this and safeguard this love for stories. And there are many storytellers among us, and my mother was one of them. But I'm sure in this audience we have like people who read aloud for children, or who has the memory of having enjoyed this experience with someone. And I think this is one of the rituals that build communities of readers, communities of people, and I love it. And I wanted to say thank you to my mother. When I was a little child, I was like a tyrant who took for granted the privilege of enjoying one story each night. But as an adult, I wanted to say thank you to my mother for all those wonderful performances. And maybe this was the first seed of my becoming a writer, an author. So yeah.
You mentioned that your mother wanted to be a librarian.
Yeah.
Papyrus is a love letter to many people and to books, and it's a wonderful homage to librarians.
To libraries.
And to libraries.
Library.
From the earliest librarians that we know about at the Library of Alexandria, right up to the librarians you encountered when you were doing your doctoral research in Florence, who perhaps wanted to protect their priceless manuscripts from the sort of dirty hands of the researchers, and who were possibly a little overzealous about sort of keeping, sort of maintaining the barrier between the readers and these beautiful handwritten ancient books. Can you tell us a little bit more about your relationship to librarians?
Yeah. Well, libraries, like books, are things that we take for granted, and we think they were always there. But they have a history, and are the result of many people's activities and fights and efforts, and someone had to invent them. They were not there. They are not something natural. Someone had to invent libraries and books and writing systems and all those things that we enjoy. So yeah, I'm always intrigued by first time when something happened, or the origins of things. And I wanted to know about the first libraries on record. And I mean, libraries have played an essential role in society. The history of librarians and libraries conveys the history of democratization of knowledge and access to literature, to art, to fantasy, to passion, to information, and also power, because information is power. So yeah, I was wondering who was the first person to build a library, and what about the first librarians in history, who were they, and their stories and lives and ventures and anecdotes. So I started doing research about the Library of Alexandria. The Library of Alexandria is not the first library in history, because there were in other civilizations, there were also libraries in Mesopotamia and Egypt. But the Library of Alexandria is legendary, and it's a leap forward in this history. The Library of Alexandria was founded because of the dream of Alexander the Great, who is himself an amazing figure. And in Papyrus, I point out that his dream, he was one of the first persons, the first people who was able to conceive the world in a global cosmopolitan perspective and dimension. And in Papyrus, I point out that maybe as opposed to his military campaigns, the best incarnation of this global dream was the Library of Alexandria, where the books from every culture, from Jews, from Egyptians, from Mesopotamia, from India, found a place there. And they engaged in a peaceful conversation and dialogue with other cultures and civilizations. So it's maybe the first time where when we built something with bricks such as openness and diversity, and yeah, some of our best valuable ideas were born there. For instance, this dialogue between different cultures and civilization, the idea of preserving text and works of art, and the idea of translation, of course. And yeah, I mean, it's something really different, and the openness, because the Library of Alexandria was hospitable with everyone who were hungry for knowledge and information and research and reading. So I think the Library of Alexandria is a revolution, something that changed the world. And maybe the internet wouldn't exist without the Library of Alexandria. The internet is like an ethereal version of the Library of Alexandria, where all the information, all the stories, the memories, the technological knowledge, and religion and beliefs were supposed to be gathered. So yeah, I think there is like a thread through the centuries and the ages from the Library of Alexandria to the internet. So no opposition between ancient world and modern technologies, but inspiration and continuity. And that's why I think Papyrus is really a book about our contemporary world and how we've arrived to the society that we have today, and how humankind became the person that we are today. So it's the origins, the roots of what we are, and that's the reason why I trace back this phenomenon to the ancient world, because I'm interested in how it happened for the first time, and the evolution of these amazing ideas that were born in antiquity, and we are the heirs of all this legacy. And I'm happy, doing research about these things, these topics that I'm so passionate about.
One of the great joys of translating Papyrus was that, among many, was that you talk about the history of translation, those early translations that were done at the Library of Alexandria. Can you talk about why you think that was so revolutionary, how it happened, and why you think that was so revolutionary?
The previous libraries in Egypt, in Mesopotamia, as far as we know, were like collections of books for priests, of kings. They were not open to everybody as the Library of Alexandria, and they were collections of books dealing just with the culture that those libraries. So if Alexandria changed the world or changed the very concept of libraries, was partly because this huge project of translating everything. It's the first time that we know of that, those kings of Egypt were not, they were not interested just in Greek culture, but in the culture of everyone around them. So this global idea is born for the first time in the Library of Alexandria. They wanted to know about the beliefs and the stories and the religion and novels and poems of other civilizations, and that's something that is amazing. It was the idea of a cosmopolitan collection and the opportunity to expand the inner world of each reader. And that's one of the reasons why Alexandria was, as a concept, so revolutionary. And many translations were ordered by the pharaohs, the kings of Egypt, ordered for the use of the Library of Alexandria. For instance, the Septuaginta translation of the Bible, of the Torah. And there is a beautiful anecdote or a fabulous tale about this translation. It's called Septuaginta because of it derives from the Latin word for 70. And the idea is that it's a fable, of course, is something, a story, that an account that is legendary, and it comes from the letter of Aristotle, that the Pharaoh of Alexandria wanted a translation of the Torah text for the Library of Alexandria. So he called 72 wise men from Jerusalem, and he ordered a translation of the Torah, and they were settled in the Pharaoh of Alexandria, and they it was like magic, because after 72 days, each of them who were working separately, they came up with exactly the same translation of the Torah, and that was like a miracle in translation, because it's
I find it improbable.
Really. It's again the evidence that every translation is a work of art, and it's different, and it's something that happens in connection with the, I don't know, the knowledge, the talent, the you know, the special particular readings of each translator. But the idea was this was an authoritative translation of the Bible. So yeah, this is the story. It's a fable, but it's some information, some true information behind this story. And the true fact is that a whole project of translation founded by the Pharaoh was taking place in Alexandria. And I mean, it's something, if you think about it, it's something amazing that a Pharaoh was investing money in knowing about other cultures, other beliefs, other ideas. And yeah, Alexandria was a symbol for, you know, wisdom and you know, this first attempt to democratize knowledge and ideas. And that's why I admire so much this project of Alexandria. That's why I wanted to start my book, which is a tapestry of stories and figures and adventures, with those mysterious horsemen who were seekers of books for Alexandria. And it's the beginning of this day is really like adventure books, or I was playing with this expectation of my public about the way an essay should start, and I decided to do it like an old ancient storyteller with a mysterious story about these horsemen, and as a symbol of how valuable books were at that time, when a pharaoh sent his elite soldiers through Greece in order to get books. And you know, if a throat had to be slit to get a book, it was done. No problem. Books were so valuable, more than human lives. So yeah, it's like the beginning of a big venture that arrives to the present, and how we've managed to gather books, to safeguard stories, and to continue translating since Alexandria. We have never stopped translating, and probably it has changed humanity, and it has changed the way we access to information, and the universe that we have in our minds. So yeah, translation.
I admire so much the way that you bring these stories to life. And you also bring to life the work of the ancient writers in a way that is so accessible, so compelling, and so very fresh for a modern reader. And you do that partly by making Papyrus a translation project.
Yeah.
Because you decided that you would be the translator of all of the fragments and the texts from which you quote from Latin and Greek. And I wonder if maybe a classicist is always a translator. But could you tell us a little bit about why you took this approach, why you didn't quote from other translations, why you decided to inhabit those ancient texts yourself and speak, kind of give them to us through your voice?
I mean, I think all readers are translators because somehow we are translating code of letters into something that is images inside our minds, and we are hearing the sounds of the voice, when people is undergone to scanners when they are reading, the areas of our brain related with hearing are active. So we are hearing voices and we are translating this code into something that is a voice talking for us. So we are translating into images, into emotions, into suspense, and we sometimes laugh and cry reading a book. So we are doing this kind of translation from something that is abstract into something that is emotional inside us. But yeah, I wanted to translate all the ancient texts, Greek and Roman, because the translations that I found as authoritative in my country, and I think it's the same thing in almost every country, are sometimes old-fashioned, and some of them very Victorian, in the sense that ancient authors are more brave than the translators, and they say things about sex and passion and love and thoughts and ideas that when are translated into these kind of old-fashioned translations, they are dying in your hands. You feel that you are not conveying the messages, maybe because those translators were so convinced that classics were models for behavior, and they were perfect, and they were on the pedestal, and there was some kind of things that you could not allow them to say. So those translations are not really faithful to the text. So I decided to translate them in a more, contemporary, freestyle, with no problems with, sex or anything. And it was fun, and I thought I was returning to the origins, to the roots, and giving a fresh version of what classics really were. And well, I dare to do it sometimes with some adjustments and translating in a freestyle, but focusing on the idea that those classics were sometimes rebellious and not politically correct, or sometimes they said things that provoke us or defy our ideas, but I love this kind of conversation with the classics, and sometimes they defy our ideas about modernity or contemporary words, and they are more in some senses and some topics they are even more contemporary than we are. So yeah, that's the feeling that I wanted to transmit to my readers, and I did this project of translation that it was like a problem somehow for my translators, I'm afraid, because yeah, it was a challenge.
It caused us all great suffering. The situation that you describe of coming upon these old, it's sometimes clunky 19th century translations of the classics is mirrored exactly in English with the translations that we have from Greek and Roman into English. And so when I diligently went, to the library to find the standard versions of the quotes that you had used, I found that either they were tonally very kind of mismatched with the elegance and grace and freshness of the style of Papyrus, and they just didn't feel like they belonged there, or they had been censored. One of the great characters in the book is the Roman poet Martial, who was a saucy poet. And in one of the books I took out from the library, I found that certain epigrams by Martial had just been blacked out by the Victorian translator, which is sad because that was how you knew it was going to be good. So this is a problem in English as well, and I think the situation that you describe is a very compelling argument for the necessity of retranslations in every generation of the classics, but not just of the ancient classics, but possibly of the 19th century novels, even 20th century novels. In a few years, the translations that we have of Garcia Marquez in English are going to seem dated, and we're going to want new ones, and that's a good thing, I think.
Yeah, that's fascinating about translation, that there is no final version of translations. Translations are always, on their way to we're founding a dialogue with authors from the past through the translations. So we have to retranslate each generation, each century, and build a different relationship with those classics. Not because if not, we are the inheritors of the prejudices and problems that our ancestors had with the classics. And the 19th century idea of the classic was so solemn, and maybe it's something very similar to what happened in medieval ages, where you can see manuscripts of poetry by Martial, and they didn't suppress the epigrams. By the monks wrote on the margin, "Monstrum," that's a monster. and it's the translators were doing it in another way, in a perverse way, because it's wicked not to be faithful to the original text, and depriving the readers of the chance to read and have their own opinions, and that's also concerns freedom of speech and freedom of reading, and that was the reason why I decided doing my own translations, and then it was like a battle all my translators had to fight in different countries with the publishers and persuade them to translate the translations, and they did it, And yeah, I think that's the reason why people say, oh, but the classic, when I read your passages about Ovid and his I don't know, he talks about dating suggestions and techniques and intrigues, and it looks so contemporary, and they say, oh, it's awkward to find that classics are so fresh. And it's a problem of translation. A good translation, a brave translation, is so essential to enjoy the past literature, and all the literature become past literature when a couple of centuries pass by. So it's important to appreciate and give credit to translators and freedom and this kind of tribute, because they are like part of our experience of literature.
I want to finish by returning to your mother. There are some beautiful lyrical passages in Papyrus about how women throughout human history have been weavers of tales, and just as you describe your mother telling tales to you, women have done for millennia by the fireside, or when they were weaving. And you talk beautifully about the relationship between text and textiles, and this is why we have all this vocabulary that comes from women's work with textiles that describes the things that we do with language. And this is such an important thread in Papyrus, but how did you reconcile this with the fact that women were so absent from most of the ancient texts that you were studying?
Questions that I was asking when I was a student at university, and nobody had answers for me. So I had to go back to the sources, to the text, and ask the question to classical text and sources. So yeah, I mean, fact is that oral societies were more democratical in terms of the ability to tell stories and to share stories, because everyone had the same opportunities. But when writing was invented, it was a technology, and it was something that belonged to men in the higher classes of society, to aristocrats, to kings, to priests. So they were protecting the power associated to those techniques, and women were deprived of the opportunity to have access to education and to become writers or authors professionally. So it wasn't a bargain for women, the invention of writing, because at the very beginning they were excluded. And my impression is that they, of course, keep on telling stories, but those who took credit for them were men. So women were the ones who teach their children how to speak. That's why we talk about mother language, not father language, mother language. And but those who wrote were men, and elite men, not all men, of course. So women were facing a difficult situation, many obstacles in society, to become writers and to be recognized as professionals of words. And I tried to find at least the names or fragments of women writers, women scientists, women orators, women poets in antiquity. And my intention was just to recreate the landscape of female voices in antiquity. And I found really many names attached to a couple of words or maybe a quote of a sentence, but it's the proof, the sign that they were there. Though it was so difficult. And it was like a tribute to the intellectual role of women through history that has been sidelined for centuries, and I tried to do it precisely in antiquity because it's the beginning, the very beginning, and I found this amazing figure that it's Encuentro. And when I found out that the first person in history to sign a text with their name was a woman, I was amazed by this discovery, and even more taken aback by the fact that this woman was not in our textbooks, and we are not studying her in a high school or university. Even in my case, that I'm expert, my field of expertise is ancient societies and instant cultures. I went through my degree without knowing about this woman. So it's incredible and it's outraging that this woman was forgotten. And I tried to make this woman reemerge from oblivion and pay a tribute to all of them. And I was studying the creation, the building of literary canon in antiquity. And I noticed that, even if women were very influential at the time, it was difficult for works written by women to be part of the canon. And there were no continuity. They were forgotten when they died. So yeah, the conclusion is, if you are a woman creator, it's not a good idea to die. Not die, because when we die, we are forgotten. So for many centuries, it was the case for women. So I was trying to, find this legacy and try to recover the memory of those women and mention them by their names. And try to reconstruct their lives, their adventures, the dangers, the obstacles, the violence, symbolic and real violence that they suffer.
Yeah. I'd like to close by reading that last paragraph, the one that I just mentioned about women storytellers. And yet, since time immemorial, women have told stories, sung songs, and threaded together lines of verse in the glow of the fireside. When I was a little girl, my mother unfurled before me a world of whispered stories. This was no coincidence. Throughout the ages, women have held the role of unraveling stories by night. Women have been the weavers of tales and tapestries. For centuries, they have unspooled their stories as they spun or threw the shuttle on their loom. They were the first to capture the universe as warp and weft. They knotted together their joys, hopes, sorrows, fears, and most private beliefs They dyed drudgery, giving it color. They interlaced verbs, yarn, adjectives, and silk. This is why text and textiles share so many words. The thread of the story, the denouement of the narrative, the fabric of the argument, weave a plot, embroider a tale, spin a yarn. This is why the old myths speak to us of Penelope's shroud, Nausicaa's tunics, Arachne's embroidery, Ariadne's thread, the thread of fate spun by the Moirai, the canvas of human fate, sewn by the Norns, the magic tapestry of Scheherazade. Now, my mother and I whisper those nighttime stories in my son's ears. Though I am no longer that little girl, I write so the stories won't come to an end. I write because I don't know how to sew or knit. I never learned to embroider, but I am fascinated by the delicate warp and weft of words. I tell of my fantasies, wound in a skein of dreams and memories. I feel like an heir to those women who have always woven and unwoven stories. I write so the old thread of voices will not be frayed. We have time for some questions.
Yes. Thank you so much to Irene and Charlotte for a wonderful and thoughtful discussion and conversation. And now we're going to move to the Q&A, and we have a few questions, not many, because I believe our author and translator are very tired. The questions can be done in Spanish, so you can try. Irene will happily answer them in Spanish, and maybe Charlotte will do the translation. And you can also in English. So please, anyone?
Yeah. Irene, estas nuevas generaciones, sobre todo de niños, yo tengo un niño de 11 años, están muy pegados a la tecnología y no necesariamente a la lectura, ¿no? En tu libro hablas de las tabletas. Ahora están las tabletas, no necesariamente las originales, ¿no? ¿Cómo como madre seguir transmitiendo esta comunicación verbal de historias, de personajes, que se acerquen a esta dimensión de lectura que tú manejas en el libro?
Let me just summarize. The question is about the relationship of new generations to technology and the influence of technology, the constant presence of technology in their lives. The question, and more specifically, the question is how, as a mother or as a parent, can you maintain a sort of enthusiasm and show them that love and encourage in them a love of books?
Gracias por la pregunta. La verdad es que el hábito de la lectura tiene mucho que ver con lo que hacemos los adultos, aunque parezca que constantemente culpamos a los jóvenes de no leer suficiente, tiene mucho que ver con ciertos rituales o ejemplo que podemos darles los adultos. Es muy importante que vean leer a los mayores, a los padres, que se lea en voz alta por las noches. Yo creo que eso es una forma muy poderosa de crear ese amor por las palabras y por los relatos, que los llevemos a bibliotecas, que los llevemos a librerías, que participen en actividades culturales y que se sientan parte de ellas, y que les demos regalos, los libros como regalos, que los valoremos, que sean parte de la conversación y bueno, muy especialmente que los dejemos fuera de esos chantajes que les hacemos a los niños: si te portas bien te daré, si no te quito, si no te castigo, si no, que se perciba como un espacio de alegría, de compartir emociones, ¿no? De relacionarnos con las palabras y abrirles así la oportunidad de formar parte de ese mundo. Luego no todos quieren, no todos lo disfrutan y no puede ser obligatoria tampoco la lectura si la concebimos como un placer, ¿no? Tiene mucho que ver la lectura con la libertad, y lo maravilloso de los libros es que las ventajas que obtenemos de leer las conseguimos solo si leemos por placer. O sea, que para que nos sea útil, tenemos primero que entrar por la puerta del hedonismo, ¿no? Porque si leemos por obligación, no hay esa conexión, no hay esas emociones, no nos impactan las palabras, no desarrollamos la empatía, no aprendemos nuevo vocabulario, ¿no? Tenemos que entrar por la puerta del placer. De todas maneras, en general, en las encuestas de hábitos lectores, se descubre que la franja de los niños son los que más horas dedican a la lectura al año, más que los adultos. Entonces, aunque habitualmente pensamos que no leen, resulta que leen más que nosotros. Y eso es esperanzador, ¿no? Porque ahí está la cartera del futuro.
Y la venta de libros también.
La bibliotecaria sabe dónde apuntar.
So I'll just summarize.
Yeah. Long answer.
The habit of reading is formed less through obligation and more through the models that children can observe. So it's very important for them to see their parents reading, and much more effective for them to witness this and to be taken to the library, into the bookstore, and invited into that space than to be than for the parents to use books as a sort of a carrot or a stick, you know. And that is because reading is associated with freedom, and in order to really benefit from reading, we need to be reading for pleasure, not by obligation. We're much more likely to absorb the information and the wisdom and the sort of, you know, imagination that is contained in books if we are enjoying it and finding pleasure in it.
Okay, we have 2 more questions.
Right. So in your book, you talk about the power of books and how throughout history, dictatorships have destroyed books in an attempt to destroy certain ideas. Do you still think that nowadays a book can have that kind of power?
Yeah, I think so, because it's a smart question, and it has to do with our contemporary debate. Since the very beginning of books history, we find testimonies of persecution, prohibitions, bonfires, and so it looks like books have been always persecuted. And I think the reason why books are so relentlessly persecuted and so passionately loved is one and the same, that books are powerful doors to intimacy, to learning, to to different worlds, to personal grow, and it's something that makes books dangerous for people in the power. So it's something that you can find in every moment of history, that books are persecuted. And the Library of Alexandria was destroyed several times, and stands as a symbol of how dangerous books can be. But we thought that this kind of situations were linked to dictatorships, not to democracies. And we are discovering now that these kind of situations are happening nowadays, right now, even in democracies. So I think that's a sign that books are still important, because you don't try to change and you don't persecute something that is not important for society, that has no power. So it's the proof that books are powerful even today, when so many people is prognosticating the end of books and the death of literature and the old paper world and many things. But books are still important, and authors are still being attacked for writing books, like unfortunately Salman Rushdie or Roberto Saviano in Italy. So people who publish books denouncing the violence or crime or unjust situations are persecuted. And also we are facing now the problem of the besieged libraries, because a month ago I was touring through Canada and the United States, and the debate there was about the books that shouldn't be in public libraries, in a school, and so on. And books are attacked, and people are trying to make some books disappear from libraries, and the attacks come from both sides, from conservatism, who is not comfortable with books about patriotic issues and with LGBT matters and so on. And on the other side, also books that are being persecuted or prohibited because they transmit the testimony, the sources of racism and misogynist thoughts and ideas, and words that are offensive to some minorities. So books are under siege right now.
We're going to take the last question.
Yeah.
In fact, mi pregunta está relacionada con lo que acabas de decir en este momento. Primero, gracias por este magnífico libro que nos hace ver el mundo clásico actual. Es fantástico, esa transposición que tú haces a la actualidad.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Y la pregunta es, ¿qué opinas de la tendencia actual de proteger a nuestros jóvenes y a nuestros niños de textos que son clásicos, pero que contienen palabras o expresiones que pueden ser ofensivas? Por ejemplo, actualmente hay una polémica, incluso en un texto que se utiliza aquí para GCSE, en inglés GCSE, sobre How to Kill a Mockingbird. Es un clásico, y ahora mismo hay una polémica y hay colegios que están dejando atrás este texto porque puede resultar ofensivo para jóvenes. O las nuevas traducciones de Roald Dahl, autor para niños, porque aparecen en sus textos palabras como gordito, este niño que es un poco gordito, etc. ¿Qué opinas de esta tendencia de proteger a nuestros jóvenes de textos de literatura?
I'll just summarize the question, which is what is your opinion of the present day tendency to protect young readers from texts that are classics, but that may contain some elements that some readers may view as offensive? And the example given is the removal of Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird from the GCSE curriculum. Is it removed, or is it just not being taught?
It's in discussion.
It's under discussion.
Because there were even complaints in some schools from students. Even from students. So young students, 14 years old students,
Yeah.
and they are studying the possibility. And some schools already have banned the book. Not banned, just they
have
avoid
stopped
with
teaching
study.
it. Okay.
Yeah, so
And the other example given was the adaptations or the sort of Bowdlerization of, if you like, of that's recently been performed on Roald Dahl's novels for children. As we are mixing Spanish and English, I don't know how to respond to the question. Do you prefer English or Spanish? Okay, then English, so nobody is out of the answer.
So yeah, it's I'm against the idea of banning books or changing the words, the original words of the book without the author's permission, which is impossible when the author is dead, of course. But you know, I think the problem is we are so afraid of books, you know, and words, and we have somehow the magic thought and the idea that changing words, we are changing realities and changing the world through the suppression of you know, some words, some disagreeable realities, but that's not the case. I mean, I'm for a critic reading of the past. We don't have to agree with all the books. We don't have to love authors in all their opinions, in all their theories, in all their words and choices in life. I love Aristotle, but he wrote awful things about women and about slaves, but he was so clever when discussing other matters. So yeah, we should be prepared to approach books with a critical attitude. So we don't have to accept everything. We can criticize their ideas, but we don't need the destruction of text, because if we do it, we are doing the work of the negationist. We are destroying historical sources. And maybe the past was not exemplary, and we had racism, and we had and women were locked away, and women had different opportunities, and but minorities were oppressed, and but we need to have this information so that we have the tools to fight this kind of situation and this kind of speeches and arguments if the danger returns, and the danger always returns. So if we are distracting all the documents of the misogynist attitude of women, we are destroying at the same time the fight of feminism through history. We are falsifying and embellishing history. And this is also dangerous, because then nostalgia set in, and history can no longer teach us. So my answer is, let's do critical readings. Let's teach children to do that. And that's the only solution to this matter. But don't be afraid. And maybe we are too afraid of discomfort, you know. But I think that's one of the main goals of art, creating this kind of discomfort. There is pedagogy in discomfort, and sometimes we have to be challenged in our ideas in order to think the arguments, and to be prepared to a debate with people who is defending this kind of awful and detestable ideas. So yeah, I think we need even detestable books.
Muchas gracias.